Translator, Reverie Editor, Henyi. Bullshit! Ling Han shouted icily, his voice ringing like cold steel clashing in the wind. Since ancient times, how many lives has the Absolute Saber sect taken? Where was their justice for those they slaughtered? This is a world where the law of the jungle reigns supreme, so stop spouting nonsense and speak with strength. Shushu Ran did not show the slightest irritation. A faint smile curved his lips as if the words before him were no more than drifting smoke. What right do you have to speak of strength before me? He replied leisurely. And who the hell are you? Ling Han shot back without yielding an inch. Shushu Ran merely flicked a finger. Wang! A saber ray whirled forth instantly, spiraling through the air as it shot toward Ling Han. The saber ray flashed like lightning, cleaving through the heavens, so dazzling that it stung the eyes of those who beheld it. Ling Han stepped forward and met it head-on with a punch, his fist striking with uncanny precision directly against the incoming saber ray. Gee! The saber ray was almost tangible, like a blade forged of pure force. It pressed against Ling Han's fist and drove him backward, forcing him to slide more than 30 meters across the ground. Zhuxuan and the others stared in shock. Shushu Ran was too powerful. So powerful it was absurd. Shushu Ran grinned faintly and said, Previously, I devoted myself entirely to cultivating Saber Heart, which slowed the growth of my cultivation tier. Once I finally grasped Saber Heart, I then focused on raising my cultivation, and in a short time leapt from the spiritual infant tier straight into the deity transformation tier. Could cultivation tiers be broken through simply by focusing on them? This was a monstrous freak. To comprehend Saber Heart at merely 21 or 22 years of age, and to step into the deity transformation tier at that same age, his might was enough to make one's scalp tingle and their hairs stand on end. Ling Han slowly withdrew his fist. Da. Fresh blood dripped from his knuckles, falling upon the grass below. Each drop struck the ground with a heavy thud like distant thunder. His tier was far too high, and with his physical cultivation added to it, every drop of blood he shed was as heavy as a towering mountain. He had cultivated the diamond body, his physique comparable to rare metal of the deity transformation tier. Yet a saber ray casually flicked from Shushu Ran's finger had managed to injure him. From this alone, one could see just how terrifying Shushu Ran's battle prowess truly was, an opponent of a higher cultivation tier combined with the power of Saber Heart. This caused Shushu Ran's saber rays to reach a truly invincible level. If such a saber ray could be unleashed with nothing more than a flick of the finger, what would happen if he wielded a 10th tier spirit tool? Ling Han pondered for a moment before suddenly breaking into a smile. I haven't even reached 20 years old yet. This year I will surely cross into the deity transformation tier. As for Sword Heart, it's not something beyond my comprehension either. Aren't you just embarrassing yourself by comparing your talent with mine? The moment those words fell, everyone nearby was visibly shaken. Indeed, they had only witnessed the terrifying might of Shushu Ran's saber ray flicked from a finger and had forgotten Ling Han's age and his strength. He too was a monstrous genius, not inferior in the slightest. Shushu Ran smiled faintly and said, How could the heart of martial arts be so easily comprehended? I began studying the saber when I was 5 years old. I even held the saber in my hands while sleeping, living with the saber, breathing with the saber, becoming one with the saber. Even so, it still took me 16 years before I finally grasped Saber Heart. That's only because you're too stupid, Ling Han said confidently. For a genius like me, 5 or 6 years would be more than enough. In his previous life, he had only managed to produce a few faint flashes of sword chi, something pitiful beyond words. That achievement had been utterly worthless compared to true mastery, and naturally provided no help for the sword path in this life. Thus, his confidence was not without foundation. He was truly kick-ass. In his former life, he had poured all his effort into alchemy. His attainments had surpassed the ancestors and astonished the entire world. In this life, however, he had devoted everything to martial arts and the sword path, and he too would blaze forth with dazzling brilliance. Shushu Ran was genuinely startled. Even after listing his own achievements, he had failed to shake Ling Han's confidence in the slightest. A deity transformation tier warrior at 21 years old, the comprehension of Saber Heart. Both of these feats were astonishing records that could be recorded in history. Yet Ling Han remained utterly confident. Was this fellow truly a fool? No matter what, he realized that mere words would not be able to break Ling Han's confidence. Shu Ran casually beckoned with his hand. Shoo! A stalk of grass flew up from the ground and landed within his fingers. He held the grass lightly and said, "Then I shall use this blade of grass as a saber to cut off your head and scatter your blood across this wilderness." How arrogant! To use nothing more than a blade of grass as a saber to behead a genius. What overwhelming confidence! Yet Ling Han did not dare to be careless in the slightest. At their level of cultivation, even a blade of grass or a fallen leaf could unleash terrifying might. Ling Han bent down and plucked up a stalk of grass as well. Holding it between his fingers, he said calmly, "Then I shall see for myself." The stronger the opponent, the greater the pressure upon him, and the greater the pressure, the greater the chance that he would comprehend Sword Heart. Sword Heart, the third and highest realm upon the path of the sword. However, unlike Sword Ray, it did not necessarily have to be built upon the foundation of Sword Chi and Sword Ray. It was merely called the third stage because once the first two had been formed, it became easier to comprehend Sword Heart. But this was not an absolute rule. Ling Han had already formed Sword Ray. As his cultivation rose, its power would continue to grow stronger. Yet no matter how powerful it became, Sword Heart could never be attained naturally. Sword Heart was an entirely new form of understanding. Ling Han's confidence was immense. Once, he had received the sword intent of Feng Po Yun. Within that intent had existed a faint trace of the great swordsman's sword heart, giving Ling Han a clear path forward. It was not about copying Feng Po Yun's sword heart. Rather, it allowed him to understand what sword heart truly was and how to walk this path. "Come, give me pressure." Ling Han smiled as he made the first move. The blade of grass in his hand thrust forward, and in an instant, Sword Ray erupted into blazing brilliance that dazzled the eyes. Shu Ran naturally did not shrink from battle. He raised the grass in his hand as if it were a divine saber and struck forward, unleashing a saber ray that slashed straight toward Ling Han. Ling Han leapt into the sky. "Come fight freely in the heavens." "Wrong," Shu Ran replied coldly. "This was never a duel. It is simply your execution." He followed Ling Han into the sky, the blade of grass in his hand swinging again and again. Saber rays intertwined and danced across the heavens, forming a terrifying spectacle. Ling Han activated the Demon Fairy Step. Combined with the explosive acceleration of the thunderclap ninth heaven, his speed became ghost-like and unpredictable. However, what shocked everyone below was that Shu Ran's speed was not inferior to his in the slightest. Clearly, although Shu Ran had not learned the thunderclap ninth heaven, he possessed another astonishing movement technique. With it, his speed could cross an entire cultivation tier, allowing him to barely match the speed of heaven tier elites. Thus, his speed was not slower than Ling Han's at all. The two clashed with speed against speed. Their movements reached the level of heaven tier elites, so fast that those watching from below could not even track them with the naked eye. Those with slightly weaker cultivation even began to vomit from the overwhelming pressure. The pressure upon Ling Han was enormous. Every step he took was accompanied by the shadow of death. What was Saber Heart? At its core, the essence of martial arts was the same. It elevated one's martial awareness to a terrifying level. No matter where an attack came from, one could instantly perceive it. At the same time, one could seize the opponent's weakness and unleash the swiftest and most lethal strike. In other words, no matter how Ling Han attacked, Shu Ran could react instantly, and Shu Ran's own attacks came without warning or trace. On top of that, Shu Ran's cultivation tier was higher. His strength held a clear advantage. Every saber strike he delivered carried fatal intent. It was terrifying beyond words. Ling Han's only advantage lay in his powerful physique. Even when he was occasionally struck, the saber rays merely sliced open his skin and flesh, never injuring his meridians. With the circulation of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, his wounds healed almost immediately. For the first time, Hunyu did not laugh or joke. Her small face had become tense with worry. Ling Han was definitely not inferior to Shu Ran, but the gap in their cultivation tiers still existed. Ling Han, go, go! beat the hell out of this guy. Hunyu suddenly raised her tiny fists and began cheering loudly for Ling Han. Translator, Reverie, Editor. Henyi Ling Han and Shushu Ran clashed in a ferocious duel, their battles shaking the heavens. Saber rays and sword rays tore through the firmament, dazzling and terrifying, as if the sky itself would shatter and the stars tumble from their celestial thrones. In contrast, the battle between Yao Huiyu and the golem instantly dimmed in significance. Though they too were kings among kings, they clearly fell one step short when measured against Ling Han and Shushu Ran. Even though most spectators could not follow the blinding movements of Ling Han and Shushu Ran's figures, their attention remained fixed upon that battlefield in the sky. At the very least, the radiant flashes of saber rays and sword rays could still be seen, colliding again and again with terrifying force in the heavens above. Shushu Ran suddenly halted his assault and spoke, his tone calm yet commanding. I am beginning to appreciate your talent somewhat. Ling Han, if you enter my sect and acknowledge me as your teacher, I can spare your life. Ling Han threw back his head and laughed loudly. I practice the sword. If I go to the Absolute Saber sect, are you all planning to change your name to the Absolute Sword sect and study the sword under me? Shushu Ran replied indifferently. You have strayed from the essence. All martial arts beneath heaven are interconnected. What difference lies between the saber and the sword? Very well, then you can use swords from now on, Ling Han said with a faint smile. Shushu Ran fell silent for a moment before speaking again, his voice cold and decisive. Today, I will behead you. You've already said those words, Ling Han replied. From the looks of things now, they are no different from passing gas. Shushu Ran ignored the ridicule entirely and merely drew out a saber. Pooh? Several people immediately burst into laughter. If Shushu Ran had drawn out a 10th tier spirit tool, no one would have been shocked in the slightest. As the most outstanding disciple of this generation of the Absolute Saber sect, and even the future sect master, what would be strange about him possessing a 10th tier spirit tool? Yet the saber he produced was not a 10th tier spirit tool. Instead, it was an unsightly, rusty, broken saber. If such a thing were considered a treasured saber, then the world would have far too many treasured sabers. Ling Han, however, grew solemn as his gaze locked firmly upon that broken blade. Is it an antique? It is an antique. Shushu Ran nodded slowly. He ran a finger gently across the blade, his expression turning distant and contemplative. From the age of 5, this saber has always accompanied me. Yet even until now, I have still not received its full recognition. Recognition? Ling Han's heart jolted. The tool spirit hasn't died? The saber was so severely damaged, could the tool spirit truly still remain? Without a tool spirit, there could be no such thing as recognition. Shushu Ran shook his head. The tool spirit died long ago. However, the person who once wielded this saber was too powerful. So powerful that even after countless years have passed, a shred of his saber intent still lingers within the blade. Without gaining the recognition of that remaining saber intent, it is impossible to unleash its greatest power. Ling Han's fighting spirit ignited like blazing flames. Smiling, he said, Then allow me to experience it. Since you are about to die, I might as well tell you. Shushu Ran suddenly raised his head, endless saber lights erupting from his eyes. This saber's name is Absolute Saber. Absolute Saber? Was the Absolute Saber sect named because of this blade? No. The Divine Realm also possessed an Absolute Saber Hall, or Absolute Saber Palace, a sect of sorts. In any case, it bore the name Absolute Saber. Could it possibly have also originated from this very weapon? Which peerless expert once wielded this saber? Could it have belonged to the founder of the Absolute Saber sect in the Divine Realm? Ling Han's expression grew even more solemn. This was extremely likely to be a divine tool. A shattered divine tool. He drew forth the demon birth sword and formed a sword formula with his left hand, preparing for battle. Hong, Shushu Ran's dark hair suddenly billowed wildly as he stared at Ling Han. His expression became savage and untamed. The mottled saber in his hand began to radiate light, as if a supreme existence was about to emerge from the blade itself. The pressure it exuded made everyone feel suffocated, their bodies instinctively bowing. Ling Han activated 4 vein-like patterns upon the demon birth sword. Yet to his astonishment, additional vein-like patterns began lighting up on their own. The 10th tier spirit tool had awakened by itself. As expected, the saber intent within that broken saber was far too terrifying. It stimulated the demon birth sword's recovery, forcing the spirit tool to react as though facing a formidable enemy. If it did not resist with its full strength, it would be shattered. How terrifying was a 10th tier spirit tool when fully unleashed? It was equivalent to a shattering void tier elite. That meant Shushu Ran, holding Absolute Saber, possessed the qualification to battle a shattering void tier elite. The thought alone made one's scalp go numb. What kind of weapon was this saber? It clearly lacked a tool spirit, and even the vein-like patterns upon the blade no longer glowed. Only a shred of the original wielder's saber intent remained. Yet it was still powerful to such an inconceivable degree. What if Shushuran's cultivation were even higher? Linghan's expression turned grave. He communicated with the Black Tower. Small Tower, what do you think of that saber? More than sufficient to kill you, Small Tower replied calmly. Can you say something pleasant? If I release my power, I can destroy everything, Small Tower answered. Linghan was speechless. This fellow wanted to destroy everything at the slightest opportunity. He sighed. I know you're extremely formidable, but can you say something more relevant? Small Tower paused briefly before replying. You can borrow a power boost. Combined with the demon birth sword, you will possess the strength to fight him. Otherwise, you are extremely likely to be slain. Linghan felt somewhat conflicted. Having advanced to the spiritual infant tier, he could once again use the Black Tower's power boost. Yet to use it here felt somewhat wasteful. However, fleeing would feel even worse. Fine, give me a power boost. He quickly made his decision. Shushu Ran drawing out that saber was utterly unfair. Only shattering void tier elites could suppress it. Even heaven tier warriors would have to avoid it. Without using his ultimate move, how could he possibly resist? Hong? A vast surge of power flooded into his body. Linghan's aura instantly skyrocketed, breaking through the limits of the spiritual infant tier. His cultivation leapt into the deity transformation tier, surging all the way to the 3rd layer before finally halting. Linghan did not stop. He took out the final 5 revolutions black jade pill and swallowed it, raising his battle prowess by another 8 stars. Now, his battle prowess stood infinitely close to the shattering void tier. Even at the peak of his previous life, with the assistance of medicinal power, he had never been as powerful as he was now. Come, battle. Linghan activated the demon birth sword and charged straight toward Shushu Ran. Shushu Ran remained utterly fearless, raising his saber to meet the attack. Ping! At the moment their weapons collided, Shushu Ran was instantly sent flying backward. Yet at the same time, a bloodstain appeared upon Linghan's cheek, fresh blood dripping down. Everyone was both shocked and confused. Earlier, Shushu Ran had clearly possessed the advantage in power, so why had the situation suddenly reversed? Yet even so, Linghan had still been injured by the saber ray. Though the wound was not severe, a wound was still a wound. Linghan touched his cheek, his hand instantly stained with blood. Even though the indestructible Heaven's Scroll had been activated, the blood continued dripping. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. The saber intent contained within Absolute Saber was far too powerful. Filled with destructive force, it suppressed the regenerative ability of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. If Linghan were to momentarily enter the Black Tower and borrow its power, he could easily dissolve that saber intent. Yet Linghan had absolutely no intention of doing so. He had not been injured for a very long time. This rare sensation allowed him to feel once more the terrifying pressure between life and death. He released a battle cry and charged once more toward Shushu Ran. Hong! Hong! The two supreme geniuses unleashed a fierce and relentless exchange of blows.